small slip of thermal paper felt unnaturally heavy in Emily's hand, as if it carried the weight of 1,000 secrets. It was thin, fragile, and slightly curled at the edges, yet it felt like a lightning bolt coursing through her fingers. Her skin, still pale and stung by the freezing December wind, began to prickle with a warmth that didn't come from the restaurant's heater. She stared at the table where the stranger had sat just moments before. It was a nondescript place near the exit, now cleared of plates and polished to a dull shine, showing no trace that a human being had ever occupied it. Emily's mind raced through a gallery of faces, old friends, distant relatives, former colleagues, but none of them fit the description. It didn't make sense. In a world where everything has a price and every favor comes with a string attached, a total stranger had stepped into her life, paid for her existence for 1 hour, and vanished into the swirling snow outside. But the true shock wasn't the money. It was the ink. As she turned the receipt over, the hurried, bold handwriting seemed to vibrate against the white background. Every stroke of the pen felt like a surgical strike against the walls she had built around her heart. In that moment, the bustling bistro faded into a blur of colors, and the only thing left in the universe was Emily and those few handwritten words that knew too much. The silent theater of Bistro de Noël. The Bistro de Noël was a sanctuary of artificial warmth. It was the kind of place people went to escape the reality of the winter, a stage decorated with expensive garlands, velvet ribbons, and gold-trimmed ornaments. The air was a thick, intoxicating blend of roasted turkey, mulled wine with cinnamon sticks, and the faint, sweet scent of pine needles drying near the hearth. Golden lights hung from the ceiling like captive stars, flickering in time with the upbeat, rhythmic carols that drifted from hidden speakers. Everywhere Emily looked, she saw the choreography of connection. She saw a father cutting meat for a toddler who was more interested in the shiny baubles on the tree. She saw a young couple whispering over a shared dessert, their foreheads touching in a private world of two. She saw elderly friends toast to another year of survival. The room was a symphony of clinking crystal, silver against porcelain, and the kind of laughter that only comes when you feel safe. And then, there was Emily. She had intentionally chosen the invisibly visible spot, the small table by the frosted window in the far corner. She told herself she wanted to watch the snow fall on the town square, but the truth was more painful. She wanted to be near the exit of life. She sat there like a ghost at a banquet, her coat still draped over her shoulders as if she were ready to flee at any moment. To the world, she was just another patron. To herself, she was a shattered mirror, reflecting a celebration she no longer understood how to join. The echoes of a broken harmony. Only a year ago, Emily didn't sit in corners. She was the one who laughed the loudest, the one who spent weeks debating which wrapping paper best matched the personality of her friends. Her life was a vibrant tapestry woven with the threads of shared plans and late-night whispers. Most of those threads were held by Marcus, a man whose laughter could fill a room and whose presence was the only anchor she ever needed. They had spent the previous Christmas Eve in this very town, arguing playfully about which movie to watch while the smell of gingerbread filled their small apartment. But the universe has a cruel way of rewriting stories in a single heartbeat. The accident on that rain-slicked highway didn't just take Marcus, it took the sun out of Emily's sky. There was no grand goodbye, no final words of wisdom, just the screech of tires, the terrifying crunch of metal, and then a silence so vast it felt like it would swallow the earth whole. Since that night, the world had turned into a grayscale photograph. Every holiday was a minefield of memories. She had spent months avoiding the places they used to go, the music they used to love, and the dreams they used to build. She came to this restaurant tonight not out of a desire for a fancy meal, but as a desperate experiment. She wanted to see if she could sit in a room full of joy without crumbling into dust. She wanted to see if she was still human enough to feel the cold, even if she couldn't yet feel the light. The loneliest prayer ever uttered. The meal Emily ordered was a hollow ritual. She chose a simple vegetable soup and a crust of bread, peasant food in a palace of luxury. When the bowl arrived, steam rising in slow, mournful spirals, she realized she didn't have the strength to lift the spoon. The aroma of the broth, which should have been comforting, only reminded her of the soup Marcus used to make whenever she caught a winter cold. She sat there, staring into the liquid, watching her own distorted reflection in the surface. Around her, the world was a cacophony of Merry Christmases and cheers. But inside her mind, there was a deafening roar of why? And how much longer? She felt like a trespasser in her own life. Eventually, she closed her eyes, hiding from the golden lights, and entreated a God she wasn't sure was still listening. It wasn't a formal prayer, it was a jagged cry from the soul. God, she breathed into the steam, I am so tired of being strong. I am tired of pretending that breathing is enough. If you are there, if you see this empty shell I've become, please, just give me a reason to walk back out into that snow. Just show me that I haven't been abandoned in this dark. It was the prayer of a woman standing on the edge of a cliff, reaching out into the fog, hoping for a hand that she was almost certain wouldn't be there. After an hour of pushing the soup around the bowl, Emily decided she had endured enough. The experiment felt like a failure. She felt more alone in this crowd than she did in her silent apartment. She caught the eye of the waitress, a young woman named Sarah whose name tag was adorned with a tiny glittery reindeer. "The check, please," Emily said, her voice sounding thin and metallic in her own ears. She reached for her worn leather wallet, preparing the mental math of the tip, wanting only to disappear back into the anonymity of the night. Sarah hesitated, her expression shifting from professional politeness to something deeply emotional, almost reverent. "Actually, ma'am, there is no check. Your entire meal, the wine, and even a generous tip for the staff, it's all been taken care of." Emily froze, her hand hovering over her purse. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else. I'm alone. No one here knows I'm even in town." "No mistake," Sarah whispered, leaning in closer. "The gentleman sitting at the table by the door. The one in the gray overcoat. He didn't take his eyes off you for the last 20 minutes. Not in a strange way, but like he was waiting. He called me over, paid for everything, and asked me to wait until he was gone to tell you. He said you looked like you were carrying the weight of the world, and he wanted to help lighten it, even if just for tonight." The manuscript of mercy. The waitress handed over the receipt, but it was the back of the paper that held the real power. As Emily turned it over, she saw the handwriting, bold, masculine, and written with a strange, calm certainty. It didn't look like the scribbles of a prankster. It looked like a decree. "You are not alone. God sees your tears. He heard your heart tonight. Continue, Emily. The winter is long, but the spring is already working beneath the snow." Emily's heart stopped. He used her name. She looked back at the waitress, her breath hitching. Did I tell you my name?" Sarah shook her head, her own eyes beginning to mist over. "No, ma'am. You didn't. And he didn't ask me for it either. He just wrote that and told me I'd know exactly who it was for." The theological weight of the message crashed over her. It wasn't just a random act of kindness, it was a targeted intervention. The words, "God sees your tears," hit the exact center of her grief. It was as if the stranger had looked past her skin, past her coat, and straight into the private room of her suffering where she kept her deepest sorrows locked away. To be seen is the most fundamental human need, and in that moment, Emily realized she was no longer invisible. The creator of the stars had used a man in a gray overcoat to hand-deliver a letter to a broken woman in a corner booth. The catharsis of the unseen. Emily didn't care about the people at the other tables anymore. She didn't care about the piano music or the clinking glasses. She buried her face in her hands and allowed the tears to come. They weren't the quiet, polite tears she shed at the cemetery. They were convulsive, soul-clearing sobs that felt like a dam breaking after a century of drought. It was the thaw. For a year, her heart had been a block of ice, frozen in the position of the moment Marcus died. But this stranger's kindness acted like a heat lamp. Every sob was a piece of that ice breaking away. She wept for the husband she lost, for the Christmases that would never be, and for the sheer, overwhelming beauty of being cared for by a stranger who wanted nothing in return. The restaurant seemed to fall away. The golden lights became halos of mercy. She realized that the stranger had left before she could thank him on purpose. If he had stayed, she would have thanked him. By leaving, he forced her to look higher. He was merely the messenger. The message came from a much higher authority. She felt a strange, new sensation in her chest, a tiny, flickering flame of warmth that she recognized with a shock. It was hope. The geography of a miracle. A miracle doesn't always involve the parting of a sea or the raising of the dead. Sometimes, the greatest miracles are the ones that happen in the quiet spaces of a Tuesday night. As Emily sat there, drying her eyes with a paper napkin, she looked at the world with new eyes. She realized that the quiet miracle is the most powerful kind because it requires us to become the answer to someone else's prayer. That stranger in the gray coat had a choice. He could have finished his dinner, looked at the lonely woman in the corner, felt a moment of pity, and gone home to his own family. But he chose to listen to that small, inner voice that told him to act. He chose to be the tangible evidence of God's love. Emily understood now that while her grief was immense, the love surrounding her was even greater. She saw that the world wasn't just a place of accidents and wet roads, it was a place of divine appointments and whispered responses. The pain hadn't vanished. Her heart still ached for Marcus, but the meaning of the pain had shifted. She wasn't a victim of a cold universe, she was a beloved daughter being watched over in the middle of a storm. Walking into the light. When Emily finally stood up to leave, her legs felt lighter. She walked past the happy families, and this time, she didn't feel like an alien. She felt like a sister. She paused at the door, looking back one last time at the table by the window. It no longer looked like a place of exile, it looked like an altar where she had met the divine. As she stepped out into the night, the air was still freezing, but she didn't shiver. The snow was falling in large, silent flakes, coating the world in a layer of purity. She reached into her pocket and gripped the receipt, the paper now warm from her body heat. She began to walk toward her car, but her pace was different. It wasn't the heavy, dragging step of a woman returning to a tomb. It was the purposeful stride of someone who had a reason to continue. The town square was beautiful. The Christmas tree in the center, which had looked gaudy and irritating an hour ago, now looked like a beacon of resilience. Emily looked up at the dark winter sky and smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered into the wind. She knew the road ahead was still long, and there would be more nights of missing Marcus, but she also knew that she would never truly be alone again. The winter was passing, and for the first time in a year, Emily was looking forward to the spring. A message to the fragile heart. Maybe you are watching this tonight from your own corner booth. Maybe you are scrolling through your phone, feeling like the world is a loud, bright party that you weren't invited to. Maybe the silence in your house is so heavy it feels like it's crushing your chest. If that is you, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Your name is known. Your tears are not falling into a void. Every sigh you breathe in the dark is being recorded by a God who counts the hairs on your head and the stars in the sky. You might not get a handwritten receipt tonight. You might not have a stranger in a gray coat pay for your dinner. But that doesn't mean the miracle isn't happening. Look around. Sometimes the miracle is the strength you found to get out of bed today. Sometimes the miracle is the friend who texted you at just the right moment. Don't close your heart. Keep the porch light of your soul on. Because the God who saw Emily in that bistro sees you in your room right now. Continue. You are loved. And your winter will not last forever.